For the purposes of this setup and this video, we'll be using this 50-litre tank, which I believe is 50 centimetres by 30 by 30. I've got this sort of side on, front to back. I just prefer it that way. A UGF box, to which we'll add some SL Aqua soil, which is a non-leaching soil. And then what we'll do is we'll get that set up, we'll put the soil in, and then we'll come back. I've added 2 litres of soil, about 1.5 litres to the UGF filter box. Probably could have added a bit more, but I had 2 litres left in a bag. And then I've put some on the base. Now notice I haven't covered the whole of the floor. So what will happen is the shrimp, when they're in, will move that bit of soil around, and all we're doing is we're just cycling this. On top of that, I've added 7 spoons of shrimp affair powder. So shrimp affair powder is a bacterial source, and when you cycle a tank, you need a bacterial source. The soil that we're using doesn't leach ammonia, but I still want to add a bacterial source and cycle this tank. Now you can add ammonia, I don't. You can add fish flakes to create an ammonia source, but again, I don't. I literally just wait until there's plenty of algae, little copepods swimming around, and I'll show you that as we go through, and a nice sort of bed of biofilm on top of here. Because the shrimp create so little bio load anyway, I've never had a problem doing it this way. So I'm just about to fill this up with remineralized water. Now you can do this, mix this water in a bucket. I'll talk about that shortly. I've actually mixed this in a bin because of the size of the room I've got, and I actually pump it in through float valves. If you use a UGF, remember to fill the UGF first. So make sure you drip the water into the UGF box first, otherwise it will just float. And I'll show you a few of the minerals that you can use. So currently I'm using GH+1. I also stock GH plus LC. There are other proprietary remineralizers on the market, such as salty shrimp, GH plus, or B salts and stuff like that. But I use the liquid one. I just find them easier to dose. It's the next day here, and as you can see, the water's cloudy. I didn't fill it all the way up because I ran out of water in my mix bin, and I'll show you that now. So that's empty. I've given that a clean out this morning. I've currently got the pump off just so we can record, but this will clear in a day or two. And then what will happen, using this Shrimps Affair setup powder, all of those piles of the powder on the bottom will get absolutely covered in biofilm. And I'm pretty certain that within sort of 8 days, so I'll pick this up in 8 days, I'm pretty certain that in 8 days there'll be loads of little copepods flying around that tank as well. Now, bizarrely, I did clean it out, but I can spot a couple of snails, so they're they're almost impossible, the snails. But I did wash this out properly, sort of took the tank out and painted the back blue as well. But we'll pick back up in a few. I'll pick back up once it clears, and then we'll pick back up once there's some life in here. Air pumps are off just so I can do a bit of recording, but as I said, a couple of days it will clear, and then what we'll start getting some biofilm build up, which we probably have already got. It's difficult to see at the moment, but it will grow, and within sort of a week to 10 days you'll have copepods and you'll start to get some sort of green wall algae as well. So I'll pick back up in about a week's time with this one and just sort of show you guys where we've sort of got with this. I know we needed to speak about mixing your reverse osmosis water for your water changes and obviously for your initial tank setup as well. So I mix mine in this 80 litre bin. Obviously, you can use smaller. And in that bin, what I do is I pre-prepare this, and I've got an air stone. I've got my air pumps off at the moment, but the air stone is to circulate. And in mine, I've got a pump at the bottom that I pump into the tanks with. Obviously, you don't need to do this, but you just need to sort of obviously mix. I've got a little nut there that I'll take out, and that was the fly zapper in the room. Got another nut. So in order to sort of do this, I know what I need to put in the mix that I use. But what I'm aiming for is following the instructions to get 5 general hardness. So that's what we're looking for. Our RO should be close to 0, or as close to 0 as your RO unit will get. And what you're looking for is you're looking to get to 5 general hardness. Now, from my perspective, I do use a TDS pen. So I currently use the Apera TDS pen, this one here. And I know, based on my settings, that if I get my TDS to 150 or just over, that's going to give me 5GH. Now, other people may tell you different. I've tested at 120, I've tested at 130, and I'm getting 4 general hardness. So 150 will give you 5GH. It's as simple as that. I'll get this set up on a tripod and I'll show you how I mix mine. Now, I didn't quite empty the bucket last time, but at the moment I'm using GH plus 1. I normally use GH plus LC, but I'm using this up because the date's expired, but it's still good in my opinion. And what I'm going to do is, it comes with a syringe. So I'll put the syringe in the top of the bottle. I'll show you that actually. Put the syringe in the top of the bottle, push it in, and then by inverting this, what I'm doing is I'm going to count. So I'll measure down to 5, put that in, and bear in mind I've usually got this stirring with a air stone. I've got them off to film. So 2, 3, 5. I'm actually going to switch the air pumps on now just to get this mixing. So we've got this mixing. I will give it 5 or 10 minutes to circulate. And then what I'll do is I could either test the general hardness and add more, a couple of mil at a time because of the size of mine until I got to 5GH. But I use the TDS pen and I'll get sort of fluctuating readings here. But if I drop my TDS pen in, the TDS pen is giving me sort of 115 or thereabouts. Now I do need this to sort of settle for a few minutes, so we'll come back in a few minutes and I'll test again, and then I'll add a couple of mil. But I'm aiming to hit at least 150 or around 150, as close to 150 as I can get that. I'd sooner go over than under, and the reason being is because some people will say to keep them lower, but from my experience, I'm actually going to put another 3 mil in there, but from my experience and from friends' experience, if you're sort of getting 120, you'll be on 4GH. Now, I know 4GH is fine for Caridina, but you'll find that sort of on low, if you're testing your tanks for TDS, you'll find that what's happening is you won't be getting, if your tanks are 120, 130, you'll be getting 3GH, not 4. Let's retest that. And so I will let this settle down. So even putting 3 million, I'm still at 130, but it does need to sort of circulate. If I go over by the pump, where it's circulating, it's 110 still, 108, it's 120, so it's fluctuating. I need it to get a really good stir round, and I'll keep adding until I get to that magic 150. Now I also add to my mix a humic fulvic acid called Rich 1. but I never had this until after I've hit 150, 5GH. And likewise, I also use, and I add this to my mix, shrimp trace. So these are trace elements. You don't have to. It's just what I use. Some additional products that I use. I'd recommend them, but you know, you don't have to. We're looking at Caridina for beginners here, so sort of start with the basics. Don't, you know, build on the basics. Okay, so I'm sort of getting 148, 149. I'd probably be happy with that. I will let it settle. I'll retest again. I'm not ready to use this water yet. I'm preparing it for tomorrow, but you can, you know, you can prepare it as you need it, type thing. There we go, 150. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'd add my additional stuff if I'm adding them, and that's just sort of how to mix water. The Airstone sort of does the mixing for you. When I only had 1 or 2 tanks, I just used to stir it with like a plastic. It was actually a piece of pipe. I don't know if I've got any. Just a piece of pipe, similar, making a noise, similar to this sort of thing. I just used to stir it with that, like a little off piece of white pipe that I used. But you know, you need to make sure it's fully mixed and room temp. So if you're bringing it in from outside cold, let it establish and get to room temp, or drop a heater in it to get it to the temp you want it. So stability, remember, is the key. So I don't know if you guys saw that little, there's another one there. Little copepod swimming down the glass. There's a couple of them in here. There's another one there. But this is 10 days after we set this tank up. Plenty of biofilm building. I've started to get little bits of algae in sort of the back edges and stuff. But what I may do is I may end up putting another light over this, because my lighting's not very strong, just to sort of try and boost the algae growth in here before we put any shrimp in. It's currently Thursday, 27th of June, and this was done on the 5th, so 21, 22 days ago. Algae isn't as I expected yet. There's loads of copepods. I'm really happy with the way it's sort of turned out. There is algae growth. I've spoken to a breeder, so I know what shrimp I want and what shrimp are going into here. But what I'm going to do is prepare this tank now for the new inhabitants. And the way I'll do that is I'm going to clean the front glass. It's hard to see on camera, but it is dirty. And I'm going to test this water. So I'm going to test it for GH, pH, and then ultimately we'll sort of move stuff in. They do a 95% water change on this. So take out the water and replace the water with set parameters that I want to put in. So let's get straight to that. So what I'm doing here, I'm just cleaning the glass. So I've gone over it with the razor, and I'm now doing it with the sponge pad. I've flipped that razor around. So as you can see in front, there's a razor there, and if anyone's interested, these are Seachem scrapers. They come in a couple of sizes, stock both of them. I like the small ones, I just feel I would get a better purchase on them, but the longer ones I probably should use. Now I'm going to test the TDS of this tank using my Apira TDS pen. From a beginner perspective, this isn't something you need to do. You could just test the pH and the GH and do a 95% water change, but I want to see how many dissolved solids are in there. So I've got a TDS of 122, which is a little bit lower, like mine, at around 140, 150. So I am going to drain this tank and refill it. The water's looking a bit yellow anyway, probably the tannins released from the soil, bits of algae and stuff. So I'll definitely empty this. But my next test then is I'm going to do this 2 ways. So my next test is a pH test, and I do have a pH meter that is calibrated. Again, the Apira. I'll put a link to how to use these up in the video, but you can sort of dip it in. But what I prefer to do is using the cap, because they are a bit slow getting the pH. tip a little bit out. So what I've done is I've actually got the solution in the bottom, and I'll sort of give that a bit of a shake and leave it. I mean, there are little clips on here that you can sort of hang them on the tank or on your pocket and stuff, but I'll leave that. And what I'll also do is I'll do some liquid tests. Now, liquid tests don't go below 6 usually, but the Sera pH one does, and that's what we'll use. And we'll use an NT Labs GH test kit, so I'm going to test both of those next. So this is the Sera pH test, and what you get is you get the pH liquid, and then you also get a colour chart. So it's quite, they go in halves, but it's quite an extensive one. And what I only really need the bottom half of this, but I've used a syringe to swill out my container, and then I believe this is 4 drops if I remember correctly. Now my pH meter is showing me quite a high pH of about 6.2, so I'll definitely be changing that water. But if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, give that a bit of a swirl. So I do like these. They are sort of a glass tube, and they're quite wide, quite big. But if we then drop that, I don't know how well this will show. Drop that next to that. Sorry for knocking the camera. It's giving me a pH of 6. My pen's reading 6.2. Now my water change water I usually put in at 6.5. So again, another good reason to do a water change on here. Let's repeat that process, but this time with a hardness test kit. I mean, I'm changing the water anyway, and my hardness test kit is the NT Labs one, GH KH. I'm not testing the KH because it's 0. I know it is because I'm using RO water that's remineralized. So we'll just test the GH on this. Now the GH test kit has 2 vials or 2 liquids, so, or reagents as they call them. So we've got GHA and GHB. And the idea is it does tell you on the back of them what to do. And I like this one because the colour change is so prominent. So that's a Sera pH kit previously we used. They're probably one of the best in the market. So this GH test kit is 2 drops of A. So let's put my A in, get the lid on that. Give that a bit of a shake. So I did drip it down the side of the bottle, so I do want to shake it. And as you can see, it's given us a pink liquid. And then to count the degrees in carbonate hardness, you add drops of B. And I'm nearly out of this. I've ordered some actually. So 1 drop, shake, see if you get a change in colour, and you'll see the change in colour. Apologies for spilling that everywhere. 2, so that's actually giving me 2 GH. So even more reason. See the vastness of the colour change. So even more reason to do a 95% water change. So I don't know where my GH has gone. Probably part of the cycling process, not sure. But 2 GH is super low. I'm not doing 2 GH. And on the basis of that, sorry, put that back in shot. On the basis of that, that's more reason to change that. It's probably 2.5, the GH, and losing a bit of this might have done that. But you get the idea. This changes colour and it's quite dramatic. So let's get this tank emptied and we'll pick up from there. So as you can see, I've taken out sort of 90–95% of the water. I haven't taken any out of the UGF box. I will square that up a little bit. I don't like to have it on the back and the sides, but I didn't want to take too much out because I didn't want to disturb too much the biofilm that's built in here. And obviously there's copepods in here that we're happy with. I've cleaned the front glass as you've seen. I'm going to leave the algae that's sort of hanging on the float valves and stuff like that, and we'll get this filled up. So let's do that next. I'm not using my auto top-up system because that's linked to everything. I only want to fill this tank. So I've added a float valve to the front of the tank. They just screw on, and I'm using my bucket of mixed water that's sort of pre-mixed to what I want it to be, and we'll just leave this to run and fill, and we'll come back afterwards. So just finishing filling up. I have, the pH was still a bit high even in my exchange water, so I've added a little bit of humic acid to that, something called Rich One, just to sort of try and lower that. It hasn't got to the pH I really wanted it to, so I've made a bit of an executive decision. I am getting new shrimp, but I've also got other tanks cycling and ready, so we'll sort of pick up the other shrimp when those come. What I am going to do is this tank down here needs resetting, and it's on about 7 pH at the moment, which is way too high. But those shrimp will be fine on this soil and a pH of around 6. So I'm actually going to move those, but I will treat this as like a new shrimp day, because the parameters are vastly different and I need to acclimate those. So I'll get all these caught, we'll get these into a jug or a bucket, and we'll move them up and we'll drip acclimate them and sort of finish this process for you guys as a beginner's guide to Caridina. So my shrimp have arrived. Obviously I've caught these, but my shrimp have arrived. I've checked them in the bag, make sure that there's none dead, and if there were, I'd notify the provider. With video evidence or photographic evidence, video's better. But I then put them in the jug, and what I want to do is I want to slowly change the water in this jug to match the water in my tank. And the way we do this is I've got an air stone that's in the tank. On a piece of airline, I use a tap, but what you could do is so there's my tap. What you could do is you could tie a knot in. And what you're looking for is to get a drip out of this. Now, if you're worried about this flooding, then you can do what I do and put that bucket, or put that jug, should I say, into a bucket. So now if we forget about these, we've still got a way of sort of managing that. They'll sort of overflow into the bucket. And all I'm going to do here is create a siphon with this pipe. So I'll open the tap and suck on that, and then adjust my tap, or my nut, so it's dripping about 1 drip per second. And then what I want to do is sort of leave that in that bucket or in that jug until that jug's full or then some. What I may do is I may transfer the water once the jug's full into the bucket and continue. Now obviously I'm not going to sit here holding this, so what I could do is put something across that to hold the pipe, and because I've lowered it, the drip's a little bit faster, so I could slow that down. And if this takes an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, I'm not really bothered. What I'm looking for is to get the water into this container very close to what's in my tank, and by doing that slowly and sort of doubling, tripling, quadrupling the water, that will do that. And once that's done, we'll put those into the tank. So let's let this drip. That's a tongue twister. Let's let this drip. Let's let this drip, and then once this is ready, we'll come back and we'll move the shrimp into the tank. So these have been dripping for a couple of hours. Before I actually move them, what I do want to do is test the pH and the TDS. I'm happy that the pH between the two tanks is identical. I've done there's a slight variance on the total dissolved solids of about 4, which is negligible, so I'm happy to move those in. If they were coming from an unknown source, or not from my tanks, then I'd net these out. But alternatively, because they're from my own tanks and I know they're pretty good, I could theoretically tip this water in, but I'm going to net them. What I also did while the drip was happening, I moved some decor in. So I've got a couple of plants on rock, some Bucelandra on rock that have gone in, so just to make them feel sort of at home a little bit. But let's get these netted and in. And there we have shrimp in the tank. So I'd keep an eye on these for a week or so. If I decided to put any more in from outside, I'd probably quarantine those. But that's our tank now set up. If you've enjoyed this mini series on Caridina for beginners, or Beginner's Guide to Caridina, I'm going to do one more in this series, and I'm probably going to do feeding, water changes, breeding and other things as a subject in that. But if you're not already a subscriber and you followed along this far, please consider subscribing to us. It massively helps the channel, helps us to grow, gives you notifications if you switch your notification bell on. It's completely free, and we appreciate your support. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you've learned something. Take care. And there they are in their forever home. Well, not forever. Probably a couple of years until I reset, but you'll have to follow along on episode 3 to learn about resets.